Folks, last night I took a stroll down Hollywood Boulevard, and you know, strange things are happening there. Store windows have been turned into glittering fairylands. Street corners are sprouting lighted trees, and everyone seems to be wearing a very special kind of a glow. So I said to myself, Dino, you know something? It's beginning to look like Christmas.
Good morning, darlings. Welcome back to Vlogmas. Today's video is going to be a little throwback for a change of pace. And it's actually going to be a throwback to a video that I started making, weeks and weeks ago now for Samhain. And if you follow me on social media, you would have heard me mention it. So I'm so sorry that it's so late, but I'm gonna throw it at you as part of Vlogmas because I want to be posting it anyway and I don't want to wait until next year or something. So my apologies for still posting about Samhain when it's nearly Yule, that I'm posting about Halloween when it's nearly Christmas. But I really hope you guys like this video. I worked quite hard on it because I'll explain everything in the video, but it was my first proper Samhain, and so I wanted to capture all of the nice things that I was able to do at the same time as balancing a lot of stressful assessments and stuff like that. So here is my throwback Vlogmas day back to Samhain, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello darlings, it's Tess. Happy Samhain. This is my first year of really celebrating this holiday consciously, and so I wanted to share it with you. Druid and pagan lore is always something that I've wanted to learn about because I know a little but not really enough. Dive deep into your fascinations, friends and enemies. Hey darlings, future Tess here. I talk a bit over the next few minutes of this video about what Samhain is and my personal sort of interpretation of the festival that I celebrated this year. But if you're less interested in that kind of stuff, and I can't blame you, or maybe you already know what Samhain is and you just want to see like the little ways that I was able to celebrate and get all of the aesthetically pleasing moments that are in this video's thumbnail, I guess. God, it sounds terrible to say that. But if you're more interested in that stuff, then skip to minute this on your screen of this video and you'll be right where you want to be. Okay, let's continue. I just want you to know that I don't consider this video or myself like any kind of authority or comprehensive source on Samhain. Like, this video really isn't educational at all when all is said and done. I certainly don't claim to be some kind of informed neo-pagan or whatever the term may be. The really rigid traditions of this festival don't really apply to like my level of knowledge, the Australian climate, and my state of mind right now. So I want this to more be about my personal vibes, I guess, alongside the traditions that I am able to include. So I hope celebrating Samhain for the first time this year is the beginning of a journey of me becoming more informed about these things. I hope it encompasses the facts about the history because my roots are Anglo-Celtic way back when, but also kind of the magic. I've always sort of semi-believed in magic, metaphorical or otherwise, so I'm down with any holiday that is infused with it, shall we say. So if you don't know what the actual festival of Samhain is, I will give you a tiny little rundown. It is pronounced Samhain. Honestly, there are a few different variations. Like, I've heard Samhain, I think, but I believe that the most correct term that I know of is Samhain, like that kind of win, like W-I-N. So it's not Samhain, it is Samhain, and let's get into having some real fun learning about it. It can be summed up quickly as sort of the ancient Celtic version of Halloween. It takes place from the evening of the 31st of October and along to the 1st of November. And it celebrates the end of the harvest and prepares the people for the dark winter months ahead. Like many pagan festivals, it was adopted by the church into All Saints' Eve, I believe it was called, and then over the years it's become what we now know as Halloween. It's a time when the veil between the other world and our world is thinnest. So what that means is that even if you don't really participate in sort of magic and fairies, that's fairies with an E, by the way, the other world also refers to the dead members of your family. So, Samhain to me really is a time for hope and a time for remembering loved ones, as you brace for the darker times ahead. So my Samhain this year definitely isn't seasonal, but I would really love to have sort of a proper Australian Samhain at some point, like taking place in our autumn, which is in the middle of the year. So yeah, I hope to do that at some point, maybe when I've got enough knowledge to kind of be able to define the celebration first and then redefine it after that. So instead of seasonal or strict, this year's Samhain is more spiritual and symbolic. Spiritual, symbolic Samhain. There's a dodgy joke in there somewhere. Anyway, after a year with some challenges, I want to be stronger than ever if I'm to bear any more dark times. I mean, hopefully not, but may as well be prepared. Just like an Australian Samhain in the middle of the year, I really hope to have a Northern Hemisphere Samhain at around this time, at least once in my life. But until that happens, I'm gonna feel the survival and the strength from across the globe. There are a few different ways I've been able to celebrate Samhain this year. My time was limited because I have had final university assessments, but I'm really glad I was able to fit in some moments of tribute. I'll also just tell you a little bit about the look that I'm currently rocking. For a Druid pagan-y festival, you really can't get past having a flower garland. Food for Samhain really is characterized a lot by the season. It's about root vegetables, dark bread, roasted meats, all the things that you would want to eat in the cooler autumn months, I suppose. This is a tiny bit of a problem here in Australia because we're heading into summer, and so all of that stuff is a little bit out of whack. But one nice thing I did manage to do is have some baked apples with my mum. I also remember reading that apples are food of the other world, which is really cool. So we put together the autumnal baking vibe and the fruit vibe and made the baked apples. We filled them with dates and raisins and cinnamon and then baked them to perfection and ate them with cream. And it was just so lovely. I hadn't had baked apples in the longest time. My mum learned how to bake apples from her mum, who probably would have been here with us today if she hadn't passed away when I was about 5. So it felt really right to be eating these things that are like food of the other world, and we've baked them to give them a lovely, warm, cozy autumn vibe. And they're also celebrating the legacy of this family member who died so long ago, but it was the kind of thing that she would have loved for us to do. So in terms of remembering loved ones at Samhain, it felt very right. Another little food thing I did was to make some little floral cakes. I was making them anyway, just on a whim, but then I decided to ice them with a little bit of a Samhain theme. So I gave them like green icing for grass and then little purple flowers to represent heather or thistles. This is me looking like a Southern Hemisphere idiot if I'm misremembering that thistles and heather both have little purple blooms. I did sort of completely invent this tradition myself. I didn't read anything about cakes, but I read a lot about food in general, so I like the idea of, you know, eating something else. And I was just playing off the presence of flowers in nature. Another thing I was able to do was go on a quick nature walk, far quicker than I would have liked. But being in nature is probably the best way to celebrate Samhain, and so I was not surprised at all to read that a really great way for you and your family to celebrate is to go on nature walks together. While I was walking, I was thinking about just nature and beauty, and so in the spirit of the Samhain nature walk, besides showing you the actual walk that I took and what I saw when I was out, which included some beautiful trees and some beautiful flowers, I'm also just going to show you now a few clips of the natural places that I have been lucky enough to walk over the few years of my life. I may not have walked there in deliberate celebration of Samhain, but those are the kinds of memories that the festival is really conjuring up for me right now, so I'll just show you a little bit of that. The last part of this video is the custom I was most excited for, building my first ever Samhain altar. I don't have a permanent pagan altar, so I made a Samhain specific one on our little antique table. The tradition is to decorate it with symbols of autumn, including harvest food, so I put down an apple and was very excited to find a little baby pumpkin to put there too. Dried leaves and acorns are also a common decoration, but I haven't got acorns, so I put down pressed flowers from my collection. Another Samhain altar activity is to make an ancestors altar to honour dead family members using mementos from them. I chose this stunning antique cameo brooch of dancing druids. How perfect is that? It's a family heirloom that was passed to me down through the generations from my great-grandmother. My grandmother also collected antique things, and the purple spoon and green sugar tongs were hers, so I put them on too to represent her. Besides that, I had to really tailor my altar to what I was feeling the magic through. So I added some unusual things that matched with my personalised feeling of Samhain this year, as I mentioned before, rather than rigid ideas of what it's quote-unquote supposed to be. I'll give you some quick insight into these details now. I wanted more symbols of nature, especially ones that have transformed a little with my creative touch, because creativity is a strong brand of magic to me. So, the oyster shell and the 3 cicada wings are actually brooches I made from picking up those items on the beach. They represent the sides of my family too, because I was with my mother when I found the wings and my father when I found the shell. The dead butterfly in the centre I found on my way home from school at about 15 years old, so that is of course a symbol of death and beauty across time and memory. I added my Celtic style cloak pin to align with the paternal Irish roots I have, and my purple ring because it's my favourite colour, but also a royal colour, as this year I found out that my maternal roots date back to King Edward III of England, if you can believe it. I added my other gemstones because they are inherently magical, and I've really appreciated their beauty and colour this year, as well as the idea that maybe they protect me a little, or at least help me protect myself. The die-cut fairy symbol above the butterfly was given to me in a pen pal package this year, so of course it matches visually and conceptually, but also represents how joy has found me in different ways this year, whether deeper and spiritually, or simply through the post, like this one. Finally, I put my mortar and pestle on the altar as a symbol of healing and making, as well as something to arrange flowers into, but I decided to invent a little ritual for it as well. I took a phrase that has haunted me in my darker moments this year, the words, "What good am I?" Then I burned it and put the ashes into my mortar and ground them to dust before sprinkling over my lavender salt and then placing the flowers. There is no time in my life for that kind of self-hatred anymore, and I wanted to have a symbolic moment to represent that. When the altar was finished, I added a pair of candles so I could light them and make a little Samhain wish for good fortune each night I had the altar up. On Samhain night specifically though, I went with a proper blessing I found somewhere, and it felt very right to murmur some rhyming words with their roots in the ancient to round out my celebration of this festival. Samhain is here, cold is the earth, as we celebrate the cycle of death and rebirth. Tonight we speak to those through the veil, the lines between worlds are thin and frail. Ghosts and spirits in the night, magical beings rising in flight, owls hooting up in a moonlit tree. I don't fear you, and you don't fear me. As the sun goes down, far to the west, my ancestors watch over me as I rest. They keep me safe and without fear on the night of Samhain, the witches' new year. Keep the magic flowing, darlings. I love you. Keep going.